Welcome to NFT Tokenomics Office Hours, Episode 5. My name is Nicholas. Office Hours is a new show that gives NFT and DAO creators a critically constructive environment for workshopping their project's tokenomics. Jango and I are here to help people with a project or a community to refine their sense of who their audience is, what they are uniquely well positioned to monetize, and how to go to market. On this week's episode, we discuss 3 projects. First, Dr. Slurp and Cookietree, two halves of Mycelium Fidelity Studio, return to the show to discuss Wind Tunnels, their on-chain visual and music project, which we discussed on episode 1. We dive into tokenomics for their upcoming collection, Circles Are Bad. Second, we talk to Jackson Ernst about his social commitment protocol, and if it's possible to motivate people to do what's good for them. Third, we talk with GoGo about ComicsDAO's new checks-inspired burn and redeem drop. If you have feedback, please send me a DM on Twitter at Nicholas with 4 leading N's, or drop into the Juicebox Discord at discord.gg/juicebox. Start a thread for your project in the Project Creators channel, or join the Office Hours thread for a discussion of this show in particular. If you'd like to discuss your project with us on air, please drop into the live recording each Wednesday at 4:20 p.m. Eastern Time, 21:20 UTC. Thanks, and enjoy the show. How's it going, Dr. Slurp?
What's up, guys? I'm also here with Cookietree, my wife.
Hey.
She's my partner and everything.
Awesome. Congratulations on Wind Tunnels.
Thank you. It was wild.
For people's context, welcome to Office Hours, NFT Tokenomics Office Hours, where we talk about NFT tokenomics for NFT projects and DAOs and try to help workshop people's ideas. Today we have as one of the main guests, Dr. Slurp and Cookietree. Sorry, I know another cookie something, so Cookietree. Are NFT artists, musician and video, like analog video artist. Is that a fair way to describe it?
Yeah. I work with the analog glitch video art, but also video art in general. So both work for me.
And today we're going to be talking a little bit about a project that we heard a little bit about, an on-chain music project in a prior episode. I think it might have even been episode 1, which has since gone to market and minted out, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe you could tell us a little more about the project, where people can check it out during the show, if they want to take a look at it and listen to it, and how the tokenomics thinking went into the project.
Yeah. So last time we talked, I described it more as a drum machine because that's what I had been building for the past month or so. But I feel like after we talked and from the talk, I just was starting to think more about the distribution aspect of these instruments, kind of marketing it as kind of an on-chain way to distribute music. Usually when you buy music NFT, it's just a file on someone's server and you're just praying that they pay their monthly fees. We want to make music where it just lives on Ethereum and you don't have to pray that someone's actually going to pay their fees. And it's not just music files, these are music instruments for you to record your own music or record your own music patterns to Ethereum and then distribute them that way. So Wind Tunnels, the idea was to put together just kind of a musical instrument toy that was very aesthetically pleasing and very easy to use. If you go to my profile and just look at my pinned tweet, there's a whole bunch of videos.
Yeah, I added it to the Twitter space here.
Awesome. Yes, you could check them out there, and you could see them on OpenSea, but they look a bit better in Persistence. If you just go to persistence.wtf and play with them there, they're just really fun toys. When you move your mouse or your finger from the left to the right, wind pans from the left to the right, and as you go from the top to the bottom, the speed of the sequence and the actual wind tunnel changes. So it's kind of an audio visual instrument or brush. And when we were pricing it out and just trying to figure out how many of them to release, I don't know. I just thought 1,000 would be a good goal, and wanted to price them pretty cheap. So they were we did 0.015, and it sold out in less than an hour.
Crazy. Well done.
Before we even posted a link, someone minted a few. I think the key thing that day was just we made a thread, the thread that you just posted, just explaining what the project is and why it's important. And I got a ton of people I know who care about the project to retweet it and like it. And it got more than 10,000 views that day. So I think that really helped. And then we decided to mint early just because there was just so much excitement and we didn't want to lose it between like the day of the thread and the next day. So I think that was a huge help. We posted the link, we posted it to all the Discords and messaged it to a ton of people, like once the contract went live. And then like, I would say like the first 1 to 200 sales happened in like 10 to 20 minutes. And then the last like 800 sales happened like in less than 10 minutes. Like it just went so fast.
Yeah, we actually were wondering if the website crashed or something because the sale just sold out so quickly, but then we realized that it was actually sold out. So that was pretty confusing, but exhilarating.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Congratulations. That's a great story. So if I may synthesize some of the things here, it's you created a strong visual and auditory experience, which you're able to explain through artistic language, which you did in a tweet thread, which you promoted by having friends of yours who are supporters of yours engage with it on Twitter, retweet it, etc. And then shortly thereafter, dropping the collection. And I guess it just worked.
Yeah, like we didn't really post the mid time before dropping it. We were just like, we're gonna drop it after dinner, you know, like maybe an hour before we had dinner, and then we just posted it. So we were kind of a little bit coy with the details, and like people had to like kind of stay up on it, and there was a bit of FOMO about like when's it gonna come out. So
I thought it was a really great work of art, and I haven't looked at the code, but it's I'm on persistence.wtf right now playing with it and just listening to it. And the fact that this was just caricature of what the technology is, and it's like kind of random and beautiful and playful and simple, it's really well done. I think it is a lot to that too.
nice, thanks.
Yeah, how do you feel about it since the drop? Do you feel it's given you some momentum for doing subsequent collections, or how's your thinking changed since the drop?
Yeah, so I'm just ecstatic. Like I feel like since the drop, we've just been focusing 100% on these drum machines and on-chain instruments, and trying to talk to people and meet people who want to play this kind of stuff, and just talk to them about what they actually want, and building something new on that. Like going off of that, like we're actually planning on dropping something on Friday, a new kind of like a drum machine / grid controller synthesizer. I'll let Cookietree kind of explain what it is, because we want everybody's advice about what kind of drop we should do for the next one. But we've basically been spending all of our time since the last drop putting the next one together, and putting more of like a quote real instrument and not like a toy instrument together. Like now that everybody's played with the toys, like we want to put out something that's a bit more quote serious, and like something that you could like actually change the tempo on and change rhythms and program the notes yourself. So I'm gonna hand it over to Cookietree.
Yeah, I think you just touched on some of the most exciting features of what this is going to do regarding like different beats and playing with different beats rather than just moving your mouse or your finger across the screen to kind of play around with audio and visual changes. You'll be able to actually like pause the beat, choose between 6 beats and 40 beats, right? 6 and 40 beats.
For each NFT has like a different number of beats. So it could be a number between 6 and 40, and that's kind of to get people away from just thinking in 4/4 time and like trying time signatures that people use from all around the world, like just playing with odd numbers of beats, which people usually don't do.
Yeah, and it's cool because I think the Wind Tunnels project has really connected us with people who we've been looking for and searching for, and have finally like brought them into the conversation of what we've been working on anyway. But while having conversations with these new people and kind of new community members on Discord and on Twitter in general, basically people in the community have asked us to work on a new project, and we're essentially using what the community has asked us to do and applying it into what we've already been working on. So the fact that we're dropping something this week is definitely in response to the community of people who've already collected wind tunnels, and we're both responding to them. And also I feel like it's a nice way to build the momentum around the wind tunnels project, where we're still using wind tunnels as kind of like art supplies or like our tool kit that we can pull sonic visual ideas and materials from, and then build this new collection that we're going to drop this week. And regarding the beats and the rhythm and the features of it, we'll be teasing a lot of things on Twitter. Slurp already has dropped a lot of cool things on his Twitter. You should definitely check out. We'll be posting like another very informative thread soon.
But how about you talk about like what it's called and what it was inspired by, or what the community was specifically asking for?
Okay. Yeah, so people were asking about the checks project and if we would be interested in creating some sort of derivative from checks. And at first, I think Slurp and I were just, saying, we'll think about it.
I was like, no. I was like, I don't want to make a checks derivative. And then we were at a music festival on Sunday, and then I was just like thinking about it and thinking about different drum machines. And I was like, actually, like checks is just like a grid of circles. Like, what if each check was a different button on a drum machine? Like each shape that's in the check grid. So that kind of led us to start developing a drum machine that's like kind of like a vertical rectangular array of buttons.
Yeah, I think the way that the work that was going into the drum machine as our next project was happening anyway, like it was in our pipeline to come out next. And then people saying like, what about the checks project? It kind of opened us up to do something that we weren't totally expecting. And I think that the drum machine project applies visually so well within the checks, let's say like visual vernacular, or like the visual language that people are for so many reasons just like attracted to right now. So we're kind of like putting that visual language onto the drum machine in a way that we think will be maybe like easier for people to connect with immediately, whether or not they play these types of like musical instruments online or offline or at all. Like I think for myself, I've spent many years singing but not playing instruments, and I feel like I can actually play the instruments that we're building, and that's really cool. And I think by having something that's visually familiar or related to or playing off checks will bring in people who aren't only musicians or aren't only producers. And also just in general, I think with art and thinking about like Web3 is like a venue for art, we're trying to be in conversation with the checks project. Like I wouldn't say they're not our only reference. They're not our only inspiration. They're not our only like point within this nonlinear progression of our projects. They're one thing that's happening now that I think people are connecting with, and we want to be in a way like a part of the conversation, specifically because our community members are asking us to, and kind of playing around with that. So that's been really fun.
I think it's fun to co-opt the topology of the checks and make it into something that's like actually a computer and a machine, and like not just have it be an image. Like this is like actually like buttons in a machine that's dynamic and playable.
Actually interactive. So that
it's a full drum machine, like
Very cool.
Yeah. So I guess the question that I have for you is, what do you think? And also like, do we go for an open edition? Do we go for a number similar to what we sold before, like 1010? Or do we go for a bit more?
I have a question about the nature of the collection. So with Wind Tunnels, the art was entirely on-chain, right?
Yes.
And will that be the case for this new collection as well?
Yeah, the art and sound is all entirely on-chain, and we'll be dropping on Persistence, which is the same site as before.
Very cool. And that's a site you built to do your own drops.
Someone named Neocree, who I met in Math Castle, built it. They're in the same class that I'm in.
Oh, awesome. Yeah.
They built like a website, which basically just allows people to like put in a P5 script or a P5.sound script and say like, oh, I want this to be a collection of 1,000 at whatever price, and this is when the mint will end. And it's basically just a mint front end.
Very cool. Does it handle the on-chainness as well?
Yes.
Wow.
Like
awesome.
It does all of that. It's made the hardest parts of this process for me seamless. Like the hardest parts for me are the smart contracts and the minting websites. Like making the art is the fun part,
That's so cool. Is that the Math Castle's class that's going on right now?
Yeah.
So cool. Like art school, right?
Yeah, and a few of us have already like minted on that site. Like I was the first, and then it was Exton, and then Nerom, and they all sold out too, which is very exciting.
Wow, that's awesome. I know Neocry from, we worked together on a project. They built the Zora, like a front end for Zora auction houses, which we worked together on with a project last year or 2 years ago now. So if the art is all on, because the one that you mentioned checks, and I love the idea of appropriating and the topology of checks and tapping into some of that aesthetic as well, and also making a tool that is appeals to your musical and artistic interests, but is maybe relatable to your average mintour. The one thing that also reminds me of, and I am inclined to ask, is one part of the checks project that I'm not sure how important it is, but it's at least been part of the meta about the original collection, is the possibility of burning to redeem some variant. I think the original checks you burn multiple to redeem some like a more rarer one. So I wonder if, given the on-chainness, if this is harder or not, but would there be some reason where, I don't know, if you burn 2 of them, you can redeem a special one that has a unique sound that's only available on the redeemed ones or something like that?
So we've been talking about it. I'm kind of leaning towards not being able to burn it, but we're going to add the functionality for you to actually like save and load your patterns on chain. So like it won't just be kind of like a headless instrument. Like you'll also be able to like tell it to like save the pattern that you created, and maybe you'll want to sell it now that it has this pattern that you made. Yeah. So we're kind of going against the burning thing. Like I think, I don't know if this is going to make it to the thread or not, but we kind of want to say that it's persistent, not burnable.
I guess they're all kind of burnable, but maybe you can't redeem for anything.
Yeah, you could burn it if you want, but we're not going to give you anything. Like we want you to use the instrument, not burn it. Like it's not a economic tool. It's more like an experiment in like persistent rhythms. Like when in history have you been able to like buy an instrument for like $15 and have a beat saved from that instrument forever?
It's very like sick to take the tool that can be used by anyone to make beats and have this importance of low cost instrument at your fingertips you can program. But the way to start, I love the idea of just taking it and creating art projects on top of it that just express it in a little way, and then a week later do another version of that, as long as it takes for other folks to pick up on it and contribute to that exploration of what the hell the machine underneath means. But yeah, just like using your own tool that it's the way it can flex and how it can be used is pretty awesome to see. I'm looking forward to the next one, and it's cool to kind of use bits of the checks meta and then kind of evolve from there, depending on if you have a strong conviction of something you want to do that's super new, or if there's something else happening that you want to attach to.
Yeah.
So for saving files, they'll be saved like to a registry, and you could retrieve them directly from the chain as well?
Yeah, so this isn't going to be in the version that you mint, but we're going to be, Neocry has a way for us to add this to the contract like a couple days after the mint, thankfully. But basically the contract for each token ID will be able to save a string that will contain like a JSON blob, which sets like how the machine will be set up.
Cool.
So it's just all be on chain.
So that basically just gets piped into the sketch, and it just works.
Exactly. Like when you like at the top of the JavaScript for the sketch, like it gets like a variable for the token ID and a variable for like the block hash and or the transaction hash. So this will be a third variable, which is kind of just like the JSON message or the JSON command, which will it basically like putting in a memory card into your Nintendo 64. But this memory card has a song.
Very cool. Yeah, it makes perfect sense to me. I'm excited. The only thing I think of is it seems like you have some audience. I don't know how many. I could go look how many people minted. Like how many individual holders there are. Let me see on OpenSea here.
We have like 300-ish.
I guess one thing that may be worth considering is I think like the genius of something like an original Bored Apes era Yuga was creating a collector base and then creating subsequent collections that were either freebies for those people or even more likely double supply where half are free to claim to prior owners and half are expanding the collection. Not that those like percentages or ratios are the right ones at all for this world, but it does seem like you may want to consider some mechanics that sort of string along an audience so that number gets bigger. The 270 owners now gets bigger over time, and they have some reason to continue participating. Like either it could be a benefit for having participated previously, obviously like allow lists and things are one way, or although I don't know that right now there's enough demand to do like a 2-stage drop, but maybe even just, I don't know, it doesn't, maybe my head is just in checks a little bit too much right now, but it does make me think about having some base instrument that you could deviate like the corruptions, and by deviating you have you sort of lock yourself into a certain path along the instrument's evolution or something. Yeah, it's a bit involved and maybe a slightly different project than what you're doing, but something where there's a reason to come back, and maybe there's only going to be 5 of this version of the pad, and so you have to swap for it quickly or something. Anyway, an idea for a future collection perhaps.
Yeah, like I think for this one we're not planning on doing an allow list. Like we're also planning on like making the price a bit cheaper on the second collection, like making it like 0.01, and the last one was 0.015. So something in like that range, like making it a bit cheaper. But possibly if we make the supply bigger, we don't really need an allow list. But I definitely hear the feedback for like future collections or bigger collections. Like we're trying to work with like famous musicians and quote real musicians to like build them an instrument and have them distribute songs. So possibly have the people who hold our other instruments have first access to those. Definitely want to do things like that. But for this drop, that's a bit cheaper and larger. I don't think it makes sense to do an allow list.
What's the thinking behind the price change?
Well, we want to make, like, one, it's a derivative, like it is its own instrument, but it is a checks derivative in some way. And the other thinking behind it is we want people to buy a lot of them because each one's going to be a different time signature, like any number between 6 and 40 beats, like in your slot. So people, like, it's kind of like buying art supplies. Like you don't only just want to buy one color, like you want to buy a ton of different markers. So this is like a way to encourage people to like buy many drum machines and experiments with different numbers of beats. Also, like we're still trying to figure out what the supply is going to be. Like I'm wondering if y'all have any thoughts about whether to do like, let's say 1,000 versus 4,000 versus open edition.
I think 4,000 is a lot. I think I like 1,000 or timed edition. I guess the challenge with the timed edition is without the burn mechanic, there's no like urgency to mint. So the timed edition might not work as well as just a fixed supply.
Like I'm just thinking the market can probably take more than 1,000 right now, given like the sellout of 1,000 before at a higher price.
Potentially, although there isn't a lot of secondary volume. If there was a lot of frothy secondary, then yeah, maybe people would be happy to get in lower than the floor or whatever on a second collection. I do think people will mint it, but it's not, there isn't like demand. I don't know. There's like 6 ETH volume on the secondary so far. So granted it's new and the price is very low. So that is a lot of swaps, but I don't know. It depends. It depends if you care about selling out or not.
We would like to sell out.
Yeah. It's fun.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, there's been a lot of swaps. Like I feel like over 500 of them have been sold.
Let me just check out the analytics here. Activity. Last swap was 8 hours ago. There were a bunch 16 hours ago, and then a bunch yesterday.
People from the community have been sweeping.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. Like if you look at the holders, like there's like one person with more than 50, 4 people between 25 and 50, 12 people who have up to 25, which isn't a lot of people, but people have been sweeping when the price goes down.
I see what you mean about like with the checks derivative, it's possible that you should go higher in supply if you manage to catch a wave.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess this is the big question at this point, like the building and all that stuff, like that'll get done, but we just don't know how many to make. And yeah.
And also just the sense of urgency of like, how long will people be interested in this intersection of what we're building and just all of the like buzz around checks. Like I feel like we've been working for so long and now we're like at the moment where there's real interest, from people who want us to build more in a way that like makes sense for what was already being built. So I feel like we're trying to figure out that balance of, just timing and quantity, which I guess is part of the fun, right?
Totally. I mean, 270 unique owners. You've got some whales stacking. So some of the whales will buy a bunch, double digits, I think probably some of the owners of the prior collection will buy multiples as well. Some maybe will just buy one. So it seems likely that you could sell over 1,000, especially at a lower price, especially with the success of the last collection, the Math Castles connection, the checks connection, and the growing reputation. Yeah, it's hard to say, but I think somewhere in that 1,000 to 4,000 range, maybe 2,500. I don't know.
We'll see. I think it'll become clear in the next few days. Also, like when we like formally announce it and see what the reaction is, that'll definitely change what we do too.
I mean, the one thing about Allow List that was nice is the pre-mint, like, people declaring their intention to mint.
Yeah.
Lets you make some decisions on the basis of that information. I don't know if there's a way to, I don't know if pre-mint just lets you do something like that, or if it's not your vibe. But maybe if you could get a sense of how many people were, wanted to be notified when the drop happens, it could inform the total supply.
Yeah, we could do that. I just don't see an easy way of getting an Allow List like into the.
Might not even be an Allow List. Maybe it's just like a notification, like, hey, mint is open or whatever.
Yeah, we could do that. I don't know. I don't necessarily see our people signing up for that.
Yeah, sure. All right, how's your Discord? How many people are in the Discord?
Like before the drop, there was like 20, and now we have like 50 or 60.
Okay.
And like a group of people like actively talking and asking for samples and giving good feedback too.
Cool.
That's like more action than our Discord has ever seen, which is very fun.
Sounds like folks are forward looking to the next drop, even the next piece. So in a sense, it's kind of out of your control how many end up being minted and at what price range. It's a lot of luck and a lot of kind of intent on building out the future of it. So with the conversation, it's worth spending an hour on, but at some point, I think it does reveal itself and see what happens.
Yeah, it's super exciting, and it's awesome to talk about this again,
Totally. It's great to have you back. And maybe one way to think about this to close is like giving something back to the people who are supportive. I like the idea of going with a lower mint price, even though the pieces may be more sophisticated. But that energy, I think, ultimately your careers are long, and just being good artists, good citizens, and nice people it goes a long way in the long run.
Yeah, like we're not just trying to make $1 million and never talk to anybody again, like we're just trying to make really cool stuff and make cool art supplies for everybody.
Totally. Love it.
Yeah. Cool. Well, thanks guys. We really appreciate you having us on and being able to talk.
Thank you. Thank you both for coming through. Maybe before you run, I'd be curious, what was you mentioned that there was some element of the last conversation we had that was useful in thinking about the wind tunnels drop. Do you remember specifically what that was?
Like, I think your questions were just the hard questions that I needed to hear and start talking about. And it was nice to talk to someone about it who wasn't Cookietree too, like someone who's like not building it with me and someone who like knows their stuff about the space and someone who I trust in like a safe space. I think like that was like the most important thing. But also like that was when I talked to you was around the time where I started like thinking of like it as it's like literally a drum machine to it being kind of just music instruments that are on chain for the venue of Web3 and like why it's so important that like we need to build instruments and distribution infrastructure for music in Web3 that's on chain. So just thinking about that side of it and not thinking about it as like a drum machine. Like the drum machine's kind of just the thing that gets you to the thing.
Makes sense.
I think that was the most helpful thing for me. And also just thinking like, why do people want drum machines? You know?
Yeah, I listened to the space last time, and I think you asked like, why would anyone buy this because it's on chain, which is such a like straightforward question. And I feel like just having to Slurp articulating why that was important in a way that made sense to propel the project forward was actually very constructive criticism through just like asking like, why would anyone buy this? You know? Yeah, I remember thinking that after listening to, just listening to the questions at some point. I feel like that was helpful. Sometimes like the simplest questions are like when you're building something and you have tunnel vision, just to like make it as best as you can, you not forget, but it's just like not front of mind, those very straightforward, like foundational questions, you know? So I feel like that was probably helpful, bringing it back to like the beginning questions that were asked while the thing was being built.
Great. I'm glad to hear that. Thank you. And happy to be helpful. It's okay. So I think one lesson we can all take away from this is the dialogue around the project after the development phase can help to crystallize anew why this is important to someone who hasn't been so involved. So maybe that's one of the things this space can facilitate.
Yeah, and I think in general, sharing the process, like both success and failure, is so important. Sometimes, especially in my experience in the art world, like usually process is very private. And many people don't want to share their art, music, etc. like until it's finished and a product and has like nice packaging. But I feel like it's really cool to like, even for me, I feel like I learned a bunch listening to Slurp. And to your questions about the project, like I feel like just sharing and being more transparent about like the process on what's working is so helpful for everyone, you know?
Definitely. It's cool to hear that the incubation at Math Castles is also leading to collection selling and artists doing well. So awesome. Thank you both for coming through, and best of luck with the next drop, and definitely keep us up to date. I hope you come back and tell us how it goes afterwards.
Yeah, we definitely will. Be on the lookout. It's called Circles Are Bad.
Yeah, I've seen this floating around. Okay, circles are bad.
All right. Thanks. We'll talk to you later.
Sure thing.
Yeah.
Thanks. I know we had Yadi Yadi. Yeah, Yadi Yadi. I was going to say it a third time. I don't know if you're able to speak today. If not, I know Gogo was also maybe thinking about talking about comics related drop questions. Or if anyone else in the audience has a project they're working on they'd like to chat about, NFT related, DAO related, whatever you're working on. Hey, Yadi Yadi, or Ernst.
Hey, how's it going, guys?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. This is the first time I've ever been in a Twitter Spaces, actually. This is kind of cool.
Congratulations. It's fun.
It is fun. I like it.
Actually, it's Jackson. That's your name.
Yeah,
I found you in
that's my
Discord.
name. Ernst is my ETH. Yada Yadi's my handle. Whatever you want to call me.
Cool. And what's your project?
Yeah, so my project, I'm coining it currently as the social commitment protocol. What it is kind of to shortly define it, is it's a smart contract protocol that allows you to create, kind of facilitate and manage commitments. And when I say commitments, it's a pretty, vague word, but I mean it in like a pretty literal sense. Like a commitment is a pledge or agreement to do something in the future. So that's kind of what this protocol is. I know that's not exactly a super concrete explanation of it. So
Like a workout, or what? Like a commitment to do some habit that is healthy, or what kind of thing?
quite literally like anything. So this actually started as one very specific kind of implementation of a commitment. And I'll go into that story because this is probably a better way to frame it. Whereas like a commitment is super general, where this actually started was I was in college. I'll tell a little bit of the story here. So I was in college and I had this buddy who just could never seem to like wake up at any sort of reasonable hour. We'd be like calling him at 1 p.m. trying to get him to come to class with us. He would be like asleep. And it became this like long standing joke in my friend group that he would like never wake up. And eventually this kind of led to us making bets with each other. to like all in attempt to get this kid to wake up earlier. We would make bets and we'd say like, hey, on Tuesday and Wednesday, we're all going to wake up at 6 a.m. and we all kind of have to go into our chat and just like send a picture of us like doing something, like maybe us like walking outside or making breakfast, just to kind of prove that we've woken up. And so we did this for a while, and we would like bet with each other, and I kind of worked and it got our friend to wake up earlier. And I was like, okay, this is like, it was kind of fun, just a social thing to do. And from that, I was like, I could probably build this into like a website or an app or something like that. And at the time I was kind of like learning JavaScript and front-end design, and I was programming in my free time, and I tried to do this, quickly realized that like it's not really feasible to make this into any sort of like interactive game or app, mostly because like no one's gonna put in their credit card information, like put in money to like an account that then is like dependent on conditions being met for you to like get other people's money and stuff. So I put that on pause, thought it was a cool idea, it never worked out. Then like very recently, a few months ago, I came back to this because I'd been working for a few Web3 companies, and I've been getting better at Solidity and doing development in Solidity professionally. I was like, wait, this is actually like a super easy thing to implement on a smart contract layer. So I just started building this as a specific way to kind of facilitate this wake up bet that I would make with my friends. I wrote it out, and it kind of got it working to the point where you would like join an alarm clock pool with one other person, and then you'd have to submit proof that you've actually woken up like before a certain deadline on the days you select, right? And I didn't really fully develop it out because I realized that this is actually just a specific case of what is now the social commitment protocol, which I'm exploring, I guess. So now, instead of having alarm clocks being this like sort of commitment that you have to verify you're waking up, it's now, I've now have been going back and forth in my mind thinking like this is actually applicable to so many other things. You could build like productivity protocols where you'll pretty much publicly make commitments saying, I'm going to go on a 6-mile run like every week or something. And then you then just submit URLs on chain of like pictures that are verifying you're doing this. People can kind of attest to that. People can vote on whether you're actually doing this thing. And so now it's kind of formed and morphed into this pretty much collection of modules and like smart contract libraries I've been using to build out different forms of commitments. And now I'm at a point where like I could see this being used for even DAO participation. Say like you delegate your votes to someone, they would then create a commitment contract saying, I'm going to participate in governance on some sort of set interval. And you put up collateral. So if you don't actually fulfill your commitments, then you can lose collateral. So it's kind of a way to keep people honest and facilitate these commitments in a very public and almost social manner. So as far as the project goes, I'm kind of very sprawled out in what I'm doing. And I'm really just kind of exploring this idea of a commitment and seeing what's possible with it. So yeah, I think Stevie G said, I kind of made a Discord server, just throwing out my thoughts and my ideas of what this protocol could be, what kind of apps could be built on it. He said, come through this space, this Twitter Spaces, and just see if you can like get anybody to understand the idea, because I think that's what I actually struggle with the most, is putting this idea forward in like an understandable way. But does any of that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. Jango, do you want to go first?
I'm curious if the alarm clock use case is still relevant, or if you can still be played with as initial application. Like if we were to narrow this from, okay, it's an interesting research question to explore at the abstract layer, but what is one way to make it, or like to use it and narrow it in on a use case in the near future to test it and see what feels like is working well when needs like work right away. If that would be the alarm clock piece, or if there's something else that you have in mind that you'd use it for, and maybe it's worth, depending on what that maybe it's worth taking the work as is and trying to publish it to some extent to get some feedback?
Yeah, so I was kind of on a path where I thought, and I still do think, that the alarm clock is actually a viable MVP for this, mostly because there's a lot of ideas I've thrown around about like using public courts and social consensus to like verify commitments are being accomplished, but there's also a super easy way to verify a commitment is accomplished, which is literally just calling a function on chain. And for the social alarm clock, that would be kind of the MVP way to confirm that you've woken up on chain. So you would submit whatever, or you'd create the alarm saying, for example, you'll wake up Monday through Friday at 7 a.m. Then in that case, every morning you have to submit, say within some window, like plus or minus one, or maybe just minus 1 hour. Within that window, you have to just submit a transaction on chain, confirming you've woken up. I think just, I'm open for feedback on this, but I think just doing that is enough interactivity to like get people to actually wake up earlier, right? Like say you put down some ETH as collateral, and if you don't submit your wake up confirmation transaction every morning, you might be subject to some type of customizable penalty. I think the most basic penalty would be you just lock your funds in the contract for X duration of time. One step up from that would be you lose a portion of your funds that gets sent to another friend that also has their own alarm clock contract.
Do you have folks in mind who would want to be a part of either this initial circle, or like to what extent do you think it would take? Like how hard would it be to get a few people to commit to it, to try it?
I have like closer friends that would probably be trusting me enough to like say, hey, put your money in this black hole of a contract and just trust me that it works. And I mean, I think that's probably going to be the biggest barrier, is like getting people to interact with this toy and actually put money in it and kind of be trusting that it's gonna work. I mean, I've built up a pretty big like suite of tests, but I don't know. I think obviously you could just put in less money, but that might be a barrier to like get people to like.
The application has to be valuable enough for that cost and that risk to be minimal, right? I think that's if we're dealing with L1 ETH at least. If we're doing on other layers, maybe not true, but I think to some extent it still takes like some eagerness in the form of like a be real, right? To do the behavior frequently and hold yourself up to it. So if the gas is the issue, if the cost or the trust is the issue, then that might be kind of a distracting like variable that kind of. If I really would make sure to get, if you struggle to get 4 of your friends or 5 of your friends to do it, there might be something to read into to kind of like iterate on without even having spent too much resources planning it out. But it sounds like the tool is generalizable, so you can try something else and see if it plays.
Yeah. So would you say that it's kind of difficult to get someone to want to like engage in a sort of application like this and put money up to actually force themselves to wake up? Like,
yeah, you got to find a group of people who really want to get up in the morning.
Yeah.
And who struggle and who have ETH and who, I mean, is there a Web 2 equivalent to this? It seems like something like, I feel like in a way, the closest thing that comes to my mind is a gym membership. And I know that there are some gyms where you pay less. They deduct from your total fee the number of times that you come. So you pay the most if you don't show up. But I don't know if there is a Web 2, like straight up escrow the funds and I have to do something to unlock the funds. I'm not totally sure that people want that. They may, socially, your group of friends and the friend who couldn't wake up, I understand why the other majority members could perpetuate a culture of playfully bullying the other one. But I'm not as sure if the guy who didn't wake up early on his own would be putting ETH in a contract to do something that he obviously doesn't really want to do.
Yeah, and I kind of had that sense as well. Like, it would most likely, in order for someone to like engage with this, I figured it might be easier to get someone on board if like it's a partner thing. Like you go to your friend, you say, hey, like go into this agreement with me. We'll put down like $50 and we have to like commit to waking up at 6 a.m. every morning. We're going to hold each other accountable. Like we have to call each other's confirmation function or something along those lines and have it be like this kind of commitment that you're making with one of your friends, as opposed to you just on your own going to this random DApp and putting in money to get yourself to wake up early. So I figured like the raw utility in that isn't all that special. Like there's other ways you can kind of get yourself to wake up early. But if you can make it more social and interactive and kind of fun for people, then it becomes less of just this like weird kind of esoteric tool and more of just like this kind of fun game that you can play with people.
I feel like the product is kind of halfway in between motivational, like something in the neighborhood of Pomodoro's software, and on the other end of the spectrum, like a dead man's switch, which is more the actual mechanism, where if you don't do something within a duration, then whatever, the funds are liquidated or some information is revealed. Or I do think a dead man switch is interesting. I'm not sure, there must be prior art for people doing dead man switches on Ethereum, but I do tend to agree with Jango that maybe generalizing first is not the right step, and you should instead find a very specific use case to grow in, and then grow from potentially down the road. But most successful things that have to build new habits don't start as generalized products. They start as some specific, very specific application that appeals to a niche a great deal. And then from there, maybe it can grow.
The tool we were just talking about, the wind tunnels one, it's a good example where the tool itself, and what we were talking about 3 weeks ago, was like the general beat machine as the innovation. But how do you actually distribute that? Well, you got to make the collection that just figures out how to express it in a captivating way. But that's a very small little pocket of experience that folks can relate to, not because the tool is technologically exciting, but because it has other aspects around like the moment and the people and the communities that are involved that make that thing precious. And the generalized thing just is a tool for experiments going forward, that if no one else is building on it, then you can. And as long as no one else is building on it, you'll keep popping up new versions of it to experiment, and then hopefully at that point folks will catch on if there's something there.
Right. Yeah. And kind of another struggle in what I've kind of built in my head as this being is that it is so generalized. It's really just a utility, a collection of like modules that might facilitate voting or testing or confirming whether something's been done. And so those on their own aren't really anything. So yeah, I think that's definitely a good point. There has to be something specific that would be usable today that could be put out and people could actually use before like any of these promises could ever be realized. Does that make sense?
Engaged and keeps retention up is being best in class, like 10x better than the next best thing in one particular dimension. So I would maybe try and focus on just nailing something that interests you. You can use what you've written or pare it down to something that makes sense. I think Django's remark about L1 costs might be an interesting point. Perhaps you could pick up some grant to do something on Polygon, for instance, or another L2 or sidechain that would be interested in having something where you're not dealing with large enough sums of assets that it's worth being on L1 necessarily, and maybe more frequent transactions, like say a daily transaction for meditating or doing exercise or whatever. The other thing is you could also perceive of this as a dead man switch with an open-ended bounty. So maybe I put in $100 and if I sign my transaction once a day for a year, saying that I did whatever habit I wanted to form, I can get the money back. But anyone else can also go in and do the same thing. And if I fail to sign in, the funds go to, I don't know, a charity or get burned or something.
Yeah, I think that dead man switch idea is actually, I have that deployed on Gorley. I've been using that just for myself. I built a super simple interface where I just write down some like to-do item that I want to get done, and it submits it on chain with some collateral. And then if I forget to go back and like confirm that I've done it, it time locks my funds. So then I can't get that back out of the contract for like a month or so.
The big problem I see with what you're doing is that you're asking your customers to do something painful directly, whereas when it's obscured by purchasing a membership to a gym or something, the possibility of letting down your personal trainer or wasting the money on the monthly membership is implicit in the purchase, but what they feel like they're purchasing is access to something which feels like a benefit, whereas your system seems to only ask them to make a sacrifice, which is, I think, going to be a difficult sell. Stevie, did you want to pitch in something?
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to ask, could this be used as a way for a DAO to validate work on a project or some sort of side project that's being done, and then that DAO's treasury pays the person after they've completed the commitment, in turn building a reputation that they can kind of carry around from work to work? Is that something that's possible?
I think it depends. It depends on people giving a shit about the reputation that this thing builds, which is is out of order. I think people would have to already be invested in this thing for it to be a meaningful reputational. The people caring about this cannot be a prerequisite for people using it, because otherwise, why would people care about it?
Well, there's also kind of a side to the DAO story and potential use cases with DAOs where you can use it as an enforcement tool. So say like you have some sort of DAO member who is responsible for performing any action on any smart contract. We could say, just for simplicity, like say for voting on proposals. If you're a member, maybe you're in a position where you're required to vote for on proposals, you would make a commitment and you would put forth your governance tokens as collateral. And so when you vote on these proposals, it'll ping the commitment and just continuously keep confirming that you've done it. And if one is missed and there's it doesn't add up how many proposals you voted on, then there's a chance for your tokens to be lost to some sort of penalty. So in this case, it is I
think that's interesting. If you think about it in terms of rewarding people, for instance, for signing multi-sig transactions for DAOs or something like that, anything where participation is difficult, you could automate and on-chain provably dispense rewards for people who are participating and not reward people who are not participating. I think that could be maybe a more positive spin on a similar idea.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a good point, because ultimately what I've built relies on collateral and relies on pain instead of relying on rewarding. But it's at the same time, it seems like a challenge to really put forth a mechanism for rewarding and incentivizing, but maybe that can be easy once you start getting governance tokens involved, kind of allocating governance tokens to people who are doing good by their commitments.
Possibly, yeah. I would try to avoid relying on ideas that will solve mechanistic problems, like we'll put it on L2, or we'll put governance tokens in it, or we'll make it a DAO, or I don't think any of these things actually work. They can work short term in this if you're able to trick people, not intentionally, but if the pitch tricks people into thinking that will actually make the mechanism successful. But ultimately, the mechanism needs to stand on its own, and then the other things should only really be layered in where they make sense, that they augment the success of that mechanism. So I don't think having governance tokens rather than just ETH or USDC rewards or whatever, or just POAPs or something, significantly changes the score. But I do think that focusing on something that people are, at the same time, while I do think it would be valuable to make it a positive relationship where you can see people wanting to participate rather than this thing can only hurt me, why am I going near it? On the other hand, Twitter is full of people flagellating themselves over not reading enough books or consuming enough protein or drinking too many seed oils or whatever. So maybe there is something in the self-flagellation market that you could conceivably sell to the alphas, betas, and sigmas of crypto Twitter.
That's a funny perspective. Yeah, I don't know if I want to touch that side of Twitter.
I don't know if you can get away from it.
Yeah.
But I mean, I guess the point is coming through some of this is just you need to, if what you're doing is about tapping into people's behavioral psychology in order to motivate behavior, your thing should be at least cognizant of the mechanisms that are at work that are powering Twitter and TikTok and Snapchat and Be Real and, Uniswap and all this participation, there's a reason people want to participate. So if that's what your product is trying to address, it should be aware of those mechanisms and trying to be even smarter or do something that's never been done in that domain.
Like if you consider the tech aspect somewhat done, and leave the like how sound the attestation process is alone, like no, there might that never be fully, like there might always be a rebuttal process, and just be like, maybe it's a content project where you need to suggest to people certain habits that they need to come up with, or certain activities that could be dumb and more like prank-like or something else.
Oh, Squid Game on chain. That's good. Like it's a pot and everyone is trying to compete to get the pot.
Yeah, or like you put in blindly, like, okay, well, I'm gonna commit to something for 0.1, and then like 10 people commit to something, and then some curator is like, okay, cool, here's the game, and then in some form to like prove that you did the thing, but you don't know what it's gonna be ahead of time. So it's a little bit more like, it's less do-goody and more degen a little bit.
Yeah, you could imagine something like, okay, everyone pitches in 10 USDC, and it's associated with a specific NFT collection that has 10 different varieties of things, and whoever's the first to get to owning 10 of them, the attestation mechanism would be superior because it could be on-chain verifiable. So ideally, you pick some kind of bounty or some competition that is on-chain verifiable, and the first person or the last person or whatever to achieve the goal gets the whole pot or gets some part of the pot. That maybe could make more sense.
It could be on-chain, but it could even be something social. Like, I know my way around a particular aspect of nutrition. I'm gonna propose this routine that people can commit, like 10 people can commit to doing alongside the next 10 days or whatever. And you put in funds, and it's kind of more of we all get to know each other, and it's like show up for like a Google Meet session like once a week or once a day for like the duration of that session. But it's more like indie expert proposes thing to do. So it's not generic, like wake up every day at a certain hour. It's like an experience of some sort, as Nicholas was alluding to earlier. But then you have to kind of acknowledge that the project ain't a tech project anymore. And the odds and ends of like the formalities of attestation don't really matter. You just want to create access to the experiences.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think kind of what both of you have gone at is that like this as kind of a strict protocol for enforcing these kind of things and putting down collateral is kind of a shaky territory. Like, first of all, it's hard to get people to even want to participate, right? When it's just like a penalty mechanism. But I think you brought up a really good idea with like making it kind of more community oriented and making it more so social than kind of like financial, and try to keep them a little bit more separated. I think that's probably a good idea. Like, as you said, it's not really like a viable project if you're trying to make any sort of money, which at this point, I'm really not. I'm just trying to explore what could be useful and what people like might want to see, just try to put out cool apps. So, I mean, that's where I'm coming from here. Like, I just like building stuff. It's fun. I don't really care.
If that's your orientation, I really suggest getting closer embedded with a community whose vibe you like, and a community that has a certain momentum, because I think from what it sounds like, you have the skills to build full stack apps, or you're building out whatever skills you're missing to do that, which is a wonderful thing. And you want to create things that people get use out of. So I think I would try to maybe align with some group where just through observing the Discord and their activity, naturally you will see like, oh, that's easy, I could automate that, and it would create a whole ecosystem of activity within the community that they're just not able to stand up on their own. So maybe there's some ways what you've already built or something new could be relevant if you further embed yourself in some specific locations.
Yeah, that's interesting.
It sounds like you got the talent to build stuff, but it's maybe the audience is the part that's missing. So maybe if you go to the audience, the ideas that correspond to that audience will emerge naturally.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to look at it.
And hey, congrats on getting here. I think you're on that journey already, from being more dev oriented to talking about it here. I definitely agree with Nicholas there. Yeah, the application bit to test it out whenever you're ready would be the next step, and then kind of just playing with ideas, continuing to do that, and leveraging the Discord and keep showing your ideas out. It's interesting.
Yeah, I think I'll do that. I'll keep exploring, just seeing what's out there, what could be built, what might be useful. But yeah, this is a good perspective. Thanks for your feedback.
Awesome. And do keep an eye on Twitter stuff, because you can see devs making projects and what works and what doesn't, and it can give you a good sense of what finds like a community fit, something like that. Thanks so much for coming through, Jackson.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Cool. I see Gogo is here. Gogo, how's it going?
Hey there. I'm good, and yourself?
Doing well. What's on your mind this week?
I want to share the news from today.
Please.
So ComicsDAO decided to join the Czech fever is taking care of the world right now, and we decided to use their system, like the burning mechanic, to create some comics. We just launched a project in Juicebox today, Czech game, in which I think that's the cool thing to talk about, like in relation to the NFT tokenomics. So it is an NFT collection. We need to get funded to be able to produce the content, because it will be like a comic with 80 panels made by the artist that is doing the announced comics right now. He did Marvel, he did Disney, he did covers from Metallica and so on. He's amazing. And he's expensive. So we set a target to 3K. And if we don't reach this target, people will be able to claim back their money. So we basically set a Juicebox treasury to sell these NFTs. Those NFTs will then swap the metadata, swap the image once we have reached the goal, and have the images ready. And then the burning mechanic will be like the first. I can share a little bit of what's going to be. So it's going to be like a sort of a Squid Game, with Czech faces people that the last survival will get the black check, like it is with the Czechs right now. So I think it's a cool experiment, and trying to bring the comics to people's eyes at the same time as playing around with NFTs and yeah.
So they mint comics on a Juicebox project, and then if the funds don't exceed $30,000, they can get a redemption.
Yeah, 100%.
And if it does exceed $30,000, then you configure the project to disable redemptions, and you swap the metadata of the NFTs.
Yeah, and then the NFTs will have the same technical, like the burn mechanic as the checks. So we'll have the first one will have a huge page with 80 panels. Second one will be with 40 panels. The third one with 20. And to get to the rest of the story and discover who are the checks, like the colors, different characters that survive until the end, you will have to get the next generation of comics. Burn it to get the next one.
Sorry, okay, I don't fully understand. So there's a grid of 80 pages?
No, 80 panels.
From the first comic? 80 panels from the first comic?
Yeah.
And you can burn the original NFT to redeem one of those?
No. So the original, yeah, sorry, it sounds confusing. I will have to work that. We're such in a hurry. So we will basically made a comic with everything that we do, but the first thing will be like 80 panels comics. So when you look at checks, you have 80 checks next to each other. It's one image with 80 panels.
Okay, got it.
Huge image, and then telling the whole story of the comics. The comics will have generative colors scheme, so they will change colors eventually. We will change color using AI, and yeah, it's gonna be fun.
So there will be different variations of that image in the original mint, or you redeem for those different variations?
No, in the original mint.
My first question is, how are you able to achieve this with Juicebox today? I didn't think this was possible today with anything we've got built yet.
I asked this morning that if I could change the metadata in the NFTs, and people said yes. So I've
Yeah, and
Sure, but you'll be changing it globally, probably.
you'll be able to bring the token URI resolver that will be fed a token ID, and you can determine what to return from it later. So you can return a different image depending on which token was minted.
Okay.
would work.
There won't be any burning or redeeming.
Yeah, it'll just be a contract that'll be deployed and then a transaction by the owner.
It's more like a reveal.
Yeah, reveal.
Oh no, yeah, but just for the first one. So the thing is, like, the only moment that we need to change the metadata, to change the image, it will be the first when we get to like the first 80 panels. Then we'll have to create a website once we have everything set, and then add a burning mechanic, and then create the 40 pages, and then the third 20 pages. I don't know if you followed.
Sort of. But for the burning mechanic, you're going to need another contract. Juicebox doesn't currently do that, although there was a tentative solution for that with UnumDAO, which has an NFT upgrade, which could maybe be generalized.
Yeah, that component's interesting. Contractually, the component, it's kind of isolated from what currently exists, but from a user experience perspective, maybe it's something to throw on the table for JVM to consider. Probably won't be anytime soon. There's a lot going on, but certainly interesting to look at.
I think maybe it doesn't need to be in JBM so much as just like a new NFT contract that receives the original collection's NFTs.
Right.
Yeah, I think the burning mechanic doesn't need to be like in the same smart contract. Yeah, exactly. So once we get the first step done, so changing the metadata is basically changing the cover that we have drawn right now to the 80 panels one. And then once we have like sold out and have achieved the goal, like the target to pay the artist and the development, we can then create the burning mechanic in the website and have the whole experience in the website, like different smart contract.
Yeah, I think once you have the tokens, it is possible to do what you're saying. It's not incredibly difficult to do what you're saying. It doesn't exist as yet, but it's within reach, I think. Especially if you don't care about the tokens having a claim on the treasury. I think it's very doable.
What's the time frame, I think, for work being delivered, do you think, over?
The cover will get ready this week. So the rough NFT is it's not the cover is not ready, right? It's a development, and we'll be updating the cover as soon as we can. And then we'll just like try to grab some attention about this project. And once we see that we are getting attention, the artist will start working on the panels, and probably in about 2 weeks or 3 weeks, we'll be able to drop 80 panels.
Even if you were to maybe get a still of progress of the cover, maybe once and drop it once a week or maybe twice a week, and update that reveal as the cover comes along, that could be enough narrative to make it dynamic and interesting. It's still fairly simple to do. What if this reads the same token URL resolver and just kind of update it on the file code, whatever you want.
Yeah. So the token URI URL is basically the IPFS link.
Yeah, sort of. It's like a whole contract that the simplest function of that contract is to just return a single IPFS.
Okay.
More sophisticated ones will return like typical collections like Bored Apes would return a different IPFS route for each token, which you could also do. And then ones like the one we talked about with the first guest, Dr. Slurp, and Cookietree return unique code for each token ID. So the token URI resolver solves that whichever way. Currently, it's not so easy to... there's no affordance currently in a UI for doing what you're looking for exactly. Most people who are doing the burn and redeems are doing them on Manifold, where they have a specific 1155 module that issues tokens that are specifically designed to be redeemed by the same module, which is just not a feature that's built into the contract as is. It's not impossible, but it's just not built.
The upcoming version is going to make it possible for a front end to go in to the dashboard and then find their tier and edit it and change its image. So it'll be a lot more like a web studio experience, but for now, we'll just do the deployment, the complex, and the Ether funks of the world to attach things together. This checks thing is wild. I feel like a lot of folks are doing it. I wonder how of the moment it is. It seems like this project is also has some commitment and longevity components to it, and it's a lot of work to pull it off. And I haven't followed the checks thing closely. I just hope for the project's sake that if it does raise and we'll start working on it, that it has enough kind of social energy to keep motivation through the finish line. There's only one way to find out.
Yeah, it might make sense to scope it down a little bit. Like I think the checks narrative will not last in all likelihood. Checks has like this multi-stage burn redeem thing where you can mint them and then you burn them for something else and you can burn more of them for something different. But it is still kind of enclosed. So maybe not tying it to the whole destiny of the project might be wise.
The check game, you mean?
I just mean your project. Like if checks is longer cool in 2 weeks, I hope your project, as Jango is kind of pointing to, like I hope your project isn't overly dependent on checks still being cool in 2 weeks. It might be, but it might not be. It might be only for the original project. Also, maybe not so much for the derivatives.
That said, I like the timing of the project because ComicsDAO has been getting some press for its relationship with nouns and its work there that has been making visible progress now, recent mintables, and then checks at the same time. So even as a ComicsDAO pop-up, it's a cool thing to get in the habit of seeing if these pop-ups have legs, and if not, just give people access to their funds back. So you pay the price of gas to play the what if game, but you don't overcommit to the idea as a comics production entity because it's a lot of work.
Yeah, I think where we want to be is to be seen as the comics representative of Web3. And momentum is everything right now. So it's like right now to build a story around checks, it's what we can have fun with. And to focus our energy a little bit in that can bring some attention. And we learn more, we get in touch with people, we learn more about NFTs, we learn more about the community if they are keen to actually consume some content like comics content, if people likes it, or if, if it's to web 0. Or if this medium makes sense to Web3 as well. So that's basically it. So we're playing around and having some fun.
Love it.
It's a great way to look at it.
Yeah, definitely experiment. That's the way. Great. I think it's about time we wrap this episode. Thanks for coming through, Gogo, and telling us about this project. It'll be cool to see like some deliberately mutated metadata on a Juicebox project, if that's the way you choose to go.
Let's go.
Let's go.
Thanks for stopping by. Good luck.
Yeah, thanks for co-hosting, Jango. This was fun. This was a good episode.
Thanks everyone for coming through. Let's do it again next week.
See you next week, Wednesday, 4:20 p.m. EST. If you'd like to be on the show, drop us a message in the Juicebox Discord, discord.gg/Juicebox, or you can send me a message on Twitter, Nicholas with 4 leading N's. Thanks, everybody. See you next week.